Samuel stood at the cabin window watching snow fall thick over the Montana prairie. His daughter Emma pressed against his leg, her small hand gripping his worn trousers. Outside, the world turned white and silent. Inside, the table waited for supper, set for two. Emma had placed her rag doll in the third chair again. Samuel's jaw tightened. That chair had been empty for 2 years now, ever since Sarah passed. But Emma kept setting a place there, kept hoping something would fill it. A 6-year-old's faith was a stubborn thing. "Papa, can we eat now?" Emma looked up at him with Sarah's brown eyes. "Go wash your hands, little one." She scampered to the basin, humming a tune Sarah used to sing. Samuel moved to the stove, ladling venison stew into 2 bowls. He didn't touch the third plate. Emma would move it herself after she realized no one was coming. They sat together, the lamplight casting long shadows across the rough wood floor. Emma bowed her head for grace, and Samuel followed, though his prayers had grown sparse as winter wheat. "Dear Jesus," Emma whispered, "thank you for Papa and for this food, and please bring me a mama for Christmas. Amen." Samuel's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, searching for words that wouldn't crush hope or encourage impossibility. None came. "Papa," Emma watched him with those knowing eyes. "Did I pray wrong?" "No, sweetheart. You prayed just fine." "Then why do you look sad?" He reached across the table and smoothed her dark hair. "Eat your supper before it gets cold." After Emma finished, he carried her to the small room they'd built off the main cabin. She climbed into bed, clutching her doll, and Samuel tucked the quilts around her small frame. "Tell me about Mama Sarah," Emma said, like she did most nights. Samuel settled on the edge of the bed. "Your mama had the kindest heart in Montana Territory. She could make a home out of nothing but love and grit. Do you think she's watching us from heaven?" "I know she is." "Then she heard my prayer too." Emma's eyes began to close. "Maybe she'll help Jesus find me a mama." Samuel's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead and stood, turning down the lamp until only embers glowed in the small room. In the main room, he found Emma had hung an extra Christmas stocking on the mantel. A scrap of paper tucked into it read, in careful letters, "For the mama who might come." Samuel stared at it for a long moment. Then he walked to the door and stepped into the cold. Snow had drifted against the threshold again. He grabbed a broom and swept it clear, same as he did every evening. Keeping the world out had become ritual, protection against more loss. The Montana sky hung heavy with clouds, promising more snow. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Emma would wake hopeful, and he'd have to watch that hope go unanswered. He went back inside, barred the door, and extinguished the lamp. In the darkness, Emma's extra stocking hung like a question he couldn't answer. Samuel lay down on his narrow bed and listened to his daughter's soft breathing from the next room. Some prayers, he'd learned, were meant to go unanswered. It was kinder that way. The knock came on Christmas Eve afternoon, unexpected as spring thunder. Samuel looked up from mending harness leather, his hands stilling. Emma played with wooden blocks near the stove, building what she called a castle for Mama. The knock came again, more urgent. He crossed to the door and lifted the bar. Cold wind rushed in, and with it, a young woman. She stood on his threshold, shivering in a thin traveling coat. A carpet bag clutched in mittened hands. Snow dusted her dark hair. Her eyes were brown and uncertain. "Sir, I'm terribly sorry to intrude." Her voice trembled from cold or fear. Samuel couldn't tell which. "I'm Matilda Cross. I was supposed to meet a man at the train station in town, but he—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "He took one look at me and rode away." Samuel stared, uncomprehending. "Ma'am, I'm a mail-order bride, or I was supposed to be." The words tumbled out now. "I have no money for return passage. The boarding house is full for the holiday. I saw your smoke from the road and I thought I'm sorry. This was foolish. I'll go. She turned, but Emma appeared beside Samuel, slipping under his arm. Papa, she's cold. Let her come in. Before Samuel could respond, Emma grabbed Matilda's hand and pulled her across the threshold. The woman stumbled inside, and Samuel found himself closing the door against the wind, his objections dying unspoken. Emma led Matilda straight to the stove. You can warm up here. We have stew. Papa makes good stew, but it's not as good as Mama Sarah's was. She looked up at the stranger with complete trust. Are you the Mama Jesus sent? Matilda's eyes widened. She knelt down to Emma's height, still holding the child's hand. Oh, sweetheart, I'm just someone who got lost in the snow. That's okay. Lost people can stay. Emma offered her rag doll. This is hope. Mama Sarah said we should always have hope. Matilda took the doll with gentle reverence, her eyes shining with something Samuel recognized as loneliness meeting loneliness. She looked up at him, still kneeling beside his daughter. Sir, I don't mean to impose, just until the storm passes. If you could spare, you can't go back out in this. The words came harder than he intended. Not proper, a woman staying here, but I won't send you to freeze. I can earn my keep. Matilda stood, brushing snow from her coat. I'm a good cook, and I can mend. Please, I won't be trouble. Emma tugged on Samuel's sleeve. Papa, she needs supper too. Can she stay for Christmas? Samuel looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at the stranger who'd arrived on their doorstep like an answer to a prayer he hadn't dared make. Something in his chest felt too tight. One night, he said gruffly. Storm should pass by morning. Thank you. Matilda's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you so much. She set down her carpet bag and removed her coat. Underneath, she wore a simple brown dress, travel-worn but clean. She looked around the cabin, taking in the spare furnishings, the table set for two, the Christmas decorations Emma had made from paper and ribbon. Might I prepare supper? Matilda asked. It's the least I can do. Samuel wanted to refuse. Having a stranger touch Sarah's cooking pots felt wrong, like allowing someone to wear her wedding ring. But Emma was already pulling Matilda toward the stove, chattering about what vegetables they had stored, and he found himself nodding. He grabbed his coat. I'll see to the animals. Outside in the barn. He leaned against the rough wood wall and tried to steady his breathing. The milk cow looked at him with patient eyes. Samuel had told himself he and Emma were managing fine, that they needed no one. But his daughter had pulled that woman inside before he could think, had called her the Mama Jesus sent, through the cabin window. He could see Matilda moving around the kitchen while Emma danced beside her. They were laughing about something. The lamplight made them look warm, alive, like a picture from a life he'd buried 2 winters ago. Samuel stayed in the barn longer than the chores required. The venison stew smelled different somehow, though Matilda used the same pot and the same ingredients. Samuel couldn't name what had changed, only that it had. He sat at the table while Emma helped set out bowls. The little girl had moved her doll from the 3rd chair without being asked, replacing it with a real plate and cup. Matilda noticed but said nothing, just ladled stew with careful deference to his space. They ate in awkward silence at first. Then Emma started asking questions, the way children do, innocent and relentless. Where are you from? Miss Matilda. Pennsylvania, sweetheart. A town called Harrisburg. Yet, do you have a papa and mama? Matilda's spoon paused. I did once. They passed when I was 15. I've been on my own since then. Like us, Emma said. Matter of fact. Our Mama Sarah died, but we have each other. That's a great blessing. Matilda glanced at Samuel, then back to Emma. What was your mama like? Emma launched into stories while Samuel ate in silence, listening to his daughter describe Sarah's laugh, her songs, the way she braided hair. Each memory landed like a stone in his chest. After supper, Matilda insisted on washing the dishes. Emma stayed close, handing her the drying cloth, chattering about Christmas and snow and the wooden horse Papa was carving for her present. Samuel retreated to his chair by the fire, pretending to work on the harness leather while really watching them. Matilda moved through his kitchen like she'd been there before, not presumptuous, just natural. She found the soap without asking, knew to heat water first, stacked the clean bowls exactly where Sarah used to keep them. It shouldn't have felt right, but somehow it did. When the dishes were done, Emma took Matilda's hand. "Will you braid my hair before bed, Papa tries, but his fingers are too big." Samuel opened his mouth to object, but Matilda was already sitting, Emma between her knees, gentle hands working through tangles. She hummed while she braided, some tune Samuel didn't recognize. Emma's eyes drifted closed, content. He stood abruptly. "I'll check the door." Outside, the temperature had dropped further. The sky hung low and heavy with the promise of more snow. Samuel stood in the cold until his lungs burned, remembering. Sarah had died in the small room off the main cabin, the room that was now Emma's. She'd labored for 2 days trying to bring their son into the world. In the end, she'd taken the baby with her, leaving Samuel holding nothing but grief and a 2-year-old daughter who kept asking when Mama would wake up. He'd buried them on the hill behind the cabin. Come spring, he'd plant wildflowers there, same as he did every year. It was all he knew to do. When he came back inside, Emma was already in her nightgown. She ran to him for her goodnight kiss, then shocked him by running to Matilda too, throwing small arms around the woman's waist. "Thank you for staying," Emma whispered. "You make the cabin feel less lonely." Matilda's eyes glistened. She knelt and hugged Emma back. "Thank you for letting me in from the cold." Samuel carried Emma to bed. She was nearly asleep already, worn out from excitement. As he tucked the quilts around her, she murmured, "Papa, can Miss Matilda stay for Christmas?" "Please. We'll see what the weather does." I prayed for a mama, and then she knocked on our door. Emma's voice faded. "Maybe Jesus does listen." Samuel kissed her forehead and left the room, pulling the door nearly closed. When he returned to the main room, Matilda stood by the table, hands folded, looking uncertain again. "I'll take Sarah's old room," he said, the words harder than he meant. "You can have my bed. It's not proper, but it's better than freezing. I'm grateful for any shelter." Matilda picked up her carpet bag. "Sir, I'm sorry if my being here causes you pain. Your daughter is kind, and this cabin is warm, but I can see—" She stopped, searching for words. "I can see there's a ghost here that I'm not meant to disturb." Samuel looked at her then. Really looked. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 23 or 24. Her face was plain but honest, her eyes gentle. She carried herself with dignity despite being abandoned, despite having nothing. "One night," he repeated, but his voice was softer now. "Storm's coming in hard. You can't leave until it passes. Thank you." She went into Sarah's room. He'd have to stop calling it that and closed the door quietly. Samuel stood alone in the main room, surrounded by lamplight and the ghost of laughter that had filled the cabin just an hour before. He'd crossed some threshold he couldn't name. Emma had pulled a stranger inside, and now that door wouldn't close quite the same way again. Come morning, he'd need to make choices he wasn't ready for. But tonight, he was too tired to fight. He lay down on his narrow bed and listened to the wind rise outside. Somewhere in the darkness, a woman slept in his late wife's room, and his daughter slept dreaming of answered prayers. Samuel closed his eyes and tried not to wonder what morning would bring. Christmas morning arrived cold and gray, with wind rattling the shutters. Samuel woke to the smell of coffee strong, hot, and completely unexpected. He sat up, disoriented. Then he remembered the woman, Matilda. He pulled on his boots and stepped into the main room. Matilda stood by the stove, 2 tin cups already poured. She'd built up the fire and set out bread for toasting. She looked up when he entered, her expression careful. "I hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep, so I made myself useful." Samuel grunted something that might have been thanks and took the offered cup. The coffee was better than his, strong enough to stand a spoon in. They stood in awkward silence, the wind howling outside. "Storm's getting worse," Samuel said finally. "Yes." Matilda looked toward the window. "I've seen Montana blizzards before, on the train coming west. They can last days. This one will—" He didn't know if he was warning her or just stating fact. "You won't be able to leave until it passes." "I understand." She met his eyes then. "I promise to stay out of your way." Before he could respond, Emma burst from her room, still in her nightgown, eyes bright. "It's Christmas, and Miss Matilda's still here." She ran to Matilda first, not him. The woman knelt down, and Emma threw her arms around her neck. Something in Samuel's chest twisted at the sight. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," Matilda said softly. "Will you help me hang decorations? Papa says I can't reach high enough by myself." "Emma," Samuel warned, but Matilda was already nodding. "I'd be honored to help." Breakfast passed more easily than supper had. Emma chattered about Christmas traditions. Mama Sarah used to keep special songs, special foods. The way they'd string popcorn for the tree they didn't have this year. Matilda listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Emma's face light up. After dishes, Emma dragged out her box of paper chains and ribbon scraps. Matilda helped her hang them across the rafters while Samuel pretended to work on his carving. But he watched. He couldn't help watching. Matilda moved through his home with quiet competence. She noticed Emma's torn dress hanging on a peg and asked if she might mend it. She found Sarah's sewing basket without being told where to look, threaded a needle, and set to work while Emma played nearby. Her stitches were small and neat, better than his clumsy attempts. "Where did you learn to sew like that?" Emma asked. "I was a seamstress back in Pennsylvania. Made dresses for fine ladies." "Why did you leave?" Matilda's hands stilled for just a moment. "I wanted a family of my own. I thought coming west might give me that chance." And then the man didn't want you." "Emma," Samuel said sharply. But Matilda smiled, sad but not angry. "It's all right. Yes, he didn't want me, but that's his loss, not mine. I'm starting to think Jesus had a different plan all along." Emma nodded, like this made perfect sense. "Papa says God works in mysterious ways." "Your papa is a wise man." Samuel cleared his throat and stood. "I need to check the animals." Outside, the blizzard had intensified. Snow fell so thick he could barely see the barn. He fed the cow and the chickens, checked that water wasn't frozen, and took longer than necessary doing it all. The wind cut through his coat, but he welcomed the cold. It made sense. The warmth inside that made no sense at all. When he finally returned, he stamped snow from his boots and hung his coat. The cabin felt different somehow. Emma sat at the table learning a new song from Matilda. Something about angels and shepherds. Their voices blended together, high and low, filling the emptiness that had lived in these walls for 2 years. The afternoon passed in strange domesticity. Matilda taught Emma her letters, while Samuel finished carving the wooden horse. The blizzard raged outside, but inside, lamplight and voices kept the cold at bay. Emma laughed more than she had in months. Matilda smiled at simple things: bread rising, snow patterns on glass, a child's innocent questions. By evening, the temperature had dropped further. Samuel could feel it through the walls. This storm would last 3 days at least, maybe 4. Matilda couldn't leave. Not in this. Not safely. They ate supper together at the table set for 3. Emma's paper chains hung overhead. The wooden horse waited by the hearth, wrapped in cloth for mourning. Wind howled outside while they sat in warm lamplight, passing bread, sharing the last of the apple preserves Sarah had put up 2 autumns ago. Matilda met his eyes across the table. In hers, he saw understanding. She knew what this cost him. Having her here, watching life return to rooms that grief had emptied. But he also saw something else. Gratitude. Yes, but also a careful hope, like she was afraid to want too much. After Emma went to bed, Matilda stood to wash dishes again. Samuel stopped her with a hand on her arm, then pulled back quickly. You don't have to keep earning your place here. She looked at him, surprised. Then what do I do? He didn't have an answer. They stood in the lamplight while the storm sealed them inside together. 3 days stretching ahead like a question neither of them knew how to ask. The blizzard held them captive for 3 days. On the first morning after Christmas, they fell into rhythms without discussing them, as if the storm had always meant to teach them this dance. Samuel woke to coffee already made. Matilda woke to find he'd built up the fire and brought in extra wood. They met in the gray dawn, steam rising from their cups, and stood by the window watching the world disappear in white. I've never seen snow like this, Matilda said quietly. In Pennsylvania, it snowed, but not like this. Not this fierce. Montana winter's got teeth. Samuel sipped his coffee. But it passes. Everything does. And does it, she glanced at him, or do we just learn to live with it? He had no answer for that. Emma woke and the awkwardness broke. The child wanted stories, wanted songs, wanted Matilda to teach her more letters. They sat at the table after breakfast. Emma scratching words on a piece of slate Samuel had traded for last summer. Matilda's patience was endless, correcting gently, praising every small victory. Samuel watched from his chair by the fire. He'd never learned letters well himself. Could read enough to manage, write his name and little else. Watching his daughter form words under Matilda's guidance, he felt something he couldn't name. Not quite jealousy, more like recognition of what he couldn't give. The afternoon brought deeper conversation. Emma napped, worn out from learning. Matilda sat mending by the stove while Samuel worked on harness leather. The wind howled, but inside was warm, and somehow words came easier. You said you were orphaned at 15, Samuel said. That's young to be alone. It was cholera. Took half the town that summer. Matilda's needle kept moving. Steady. After, I had to work. Seamstress paid better than laundry. I was good with my hands. And so why leave, why come west? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I was invisible there. Made beautiful dresses for women going to parties, getting married, having families. But I was just the girl who sewed the seams. After 8 years, I realized I'd grow old alone in that room above the dress shop. And no one would remember my name. So you answered an advertisement. I wanted to matter to someone. She looked up then. That sounds foolish. No. Samuel's voice was rough. It doesn't. What about you? Matilda set down her mending. Emma said her mother passed, but she doesn't know the details. How do you tell a child about loss like that? Samuel's hands stilled on the leather. You don't. You just keep breathing and hope they understand someday. She was in childbirth. 2 years ago. Labor went wrong. Took her and the baby both. The words came out flat, factual, the only way he could say them. Emma was 4. Old enough to remember, too young to understand. She keeps asking when I'll marry again, when she'll get a new mama, like it's that simple. Children see things simpler than we do. Matilda picked up her mending again. Maybe that's wisdom, not ignorance. Maybe. He went back to his work. But the conversation wasn't finished. It hung between them like smoke. That evening, as Matilda rocked Emma to sleep, Samuel stood in the doorway watching. Sarah's rocking chair creaked with familiar rhythm. But the woman sitting there wasn't Sarah. Her voice was different when she sang. Her hands gentler somehow when she smoothed Emma's hair. Emma's eyes were already closing when she whispered, I'm glad you're here. Miss Matilda. The cabin was too quiet before. I'm glad too. Sweetheart, will you stay after the storm? Please. Matilda glanced at Samuel. He couldn't read her expression in the lamplight. We'll see what your papa decides. On after Emma slept. They sat by the fire, Samuel in his chair. Matilda on the bench Sarah used to favor. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt earned somehow, like they'd weathered something together and come out different on the other side. Why did you stay? Samuel asked. That first night, you could have insisted on going back to town. Your daughter's eyes asked me. Matilda stared into the flames. I saw loneliness there that matched my own. I couldn't walk away from that, even knowing it wasn't proper. Sometimes proper isn't the same as right. She looked at him. You're a good father. Samuel, Emma is loved and safe and fed, but she needs more than safety. She needs what I can't give. The admission cost him, but it was true. I can't teach her to braid hair or sew a dress. Can't comfort her the way a mother could. I try, but maybe no one person can do everything. Matilda's voice was gentle. Maybe that's why we need each other. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, something shifted, delicate as snow melting. The storm will pass eventually, Samuel said. I know. Then what happens? Matilda smiled, sad and hopeful at once. I suppose we'll find out together. They sat in the quiet warmth, neither alone anymore. While the blizzard sealed them inside a life neither had planned, but both were starting to recognize as something like home. The third morning dawned gray and cold. Emma woke coughing. Samuel heard it from the main room and was on his feet before he could think. He pushed open her door to find her sitting up in bed, small face flushed, eyes too bright. Papa, my throat hurts. He pressed his hand to her forehead. Heat radiated through his palm. Fear, cold and sharp, cut through his chest. Matilda, he called, trying to keep his voice steady. She appeared in the doorway, still in her nightgown, hair loose. One look at Emma's face and she moved, quick and sure. She felt the child's forehead, listened to her breathing, asked questions in a calm voice. How long have you felt poorly? Sweetheart, just this morning. I'm cold, but I'm hot too. Matilda looked at Samuel. We need cool water, clean cloths, and willow bark if you have it. Samuel's hands had gone numb. He stood frozen, watching his daughter's flushed face, remembering another fever. Another woman too weak to fight it. Sarah burning up while he stood helpless, watching her slip away. Samuel. Matilda's voice cut through his panic. I need you to help me. Can you do that? He nodded, not trusting his voice. Get the willow bark from your medicine stores. Fill the basin with cool water. Then bring me every clean cloth you have. He moved like a man underwater, gathering what she asked. His hands shook as he pumped water from the indoor cistern. The blizzard still raged outside. No doctor could be fetched, no help summoned. They were alone with this. When he returned to Emma's room, Matilda had stripped the sweat-soaked nightgown from the child and was sponging her with tepid water. Emma shivered and whimpered, but Matilda kept up a steady stream of gentle words. I know it's uncomfortable, sweetheart, but this will help bring the fever down. You're going to be just fine. I want Mama, Emma whispered. I know. Darling, I know. Matilda's voice didn't waver, though her eyes were wet. But I'm here. And I'm not leaving you. I promise. Samuel handed her the willow bark. She measured it carefully, steeped it in hot water, then cooled it enough for Emma to sip. The child gagged on the bitter taste but drank it down. Good girl. So brave. Matilda tucked clean blankets around her. Now you rest, and I'll stay right here. You promise you won't leave? Emma's eyes were already closing. I promise. Samuel stood useless in the doorway. Matilda glanced at him. I'll need fresh water every hour, and more clean cloths. Can you manage that? Yes. He forced the word out. Anything. Then I need you to trust me. Her eyes were steady, certain. I've nursed fevers before. Your daughter is strong. We'll fight this together. The day passed in a blur of water and cloths and desperate prayer. Matilda never left Emma's side. She sponged the child's burning skin, got her to drink willow bark tea, sang soft songs when Emma cried. Samuel brought whatever she needed: water, cloths, broth that Emma couldn't keep down. By evening, the fever had climbed higher. Emma thrashed in her sleep, crying out for Sarah, for Mama, for someone to make it stop hurting. Samuel stood outside the door, fists clenched, listening to his daughter suffer and remembering another night when he'd stood this helpless. Matilda appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale with exhaustion, hair coming loose from its braid. Samuel, I need you. He followed her inside. Emma lay small in the bed, her breathing rapid and shallow. The lamplight made her look ghostly. Talk to her, Matilda said softly. Tell her you're here. She needs to hear your voice. Samuel knelt by the bed and took Emma's small hand. It burned in his palm. Papa's here, little one. You're going to be all right. Emma's eyes opened, unfocused. Papa, where's Mama? His throat closed. He couldn't speak. She's in heaven, sweetheart, Matilda said gently, kneeling on the other side of the bed. But I'm here with you. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I promise. Matilda smoothed the child's sweat-damp hair. And when you wake up, we'll have tea and tell stories. Won't that be nice? Emma nodded weakly. Then her eyes closed again. The night stretched endless. Matilda kept her vigil, cooling Emma's skin, coaxing small sips of water past cracked lips. She hadn't slept in nearly 24 hours. Samuel could see exhaustion in every line of her body. But her hands stayed steady. Her voice stayed calm. Near midnight, Emma cried out, Mama, I need my mama. Matilda gathered the child against her chest, rocking her like an infant. I'm here, darling. I'm here. I've got you. Samuel stood in the doorway watching this woman who owed them nothing fight for his daughter's life with everything she had. Something broke inside him then, clean and sharp as ice cracking. The last wall he'd built around his heart. The final barrier of grief that said loving again meant betraying Sarah, it shattered. He stepped into the room and knelt beside them. Tell me what to do. Matilda looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. Pray. That's all either of us can do now. So he did. For the first time since he'd buried his wife. Samuel bowed his head and prayed not for himself, but for the woman who'd knocked on his door like an answer to a prayer he'd been too afraid to speak, and for the child they both loved. The lamp burned low. The storm howled. And in that small room, 3 people huddled together against the darkness, hoping for dawn. Emma's fever broke just before sunrise. Samuel felt it happen. One moment her skin burned against his palm, and the next, coolness spread like a blessing. Her breathing eased. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. She slept peacefully for the first time in 18 hours. Matilda slumped forward, catching herself on the edge of the bed. Samuel reached for her without thinking, steadying her. She's through it, Matilda whispered. The worst has passed. He nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. You should rest now. His voice came out rough. So should you. But neither of them moved. They sat there as dawnlight crept through the window, gray and cold. Emma slept between them, small chest rising and falling with steady breath. Matilda's eyes drifted closed, her head drooping with exhaustion. Samuel stood carefully and fetched a quilt from the main room. He draped it over Matilda's shoulders. She didn't wake, just pulled it closer and settled into sleep there in the chair beside Emma's bed. He stood watching them both, child and woman, as morning broke over Montana territory. The blizzard had finally ended. Outside, the world lay silent under fresh snow. Inside, something had changed forever. He understood now. Love hadn't died when Sarah passed. It had just waited, patient as winter, for the right moment to return. And it had returned wearing Matilda's face, speaking with her voice, showing itself through her tender hands, nursing his daughter back to health. This wasn't betrayal. This was grace. Samuel moved to the main room and built up the fire. He made coffee, his hands steady now. Then he poured 3 cups, one for himself, one for Matilda when she woke, and one for Emma. 3 cups on the table, steam rising in the cold dawn air. He sat in his chair and waited for his family to wake. An hour later, Matilda emerged from Emma's room, the quilt wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, but she smiled when she saw the coffee. She's still sleeping. Fever's gone. Breathing's good. Matilda sank onto the bench. She'll need broth and water when she wakes, but I think she'll recover fully. Thanks to you. Samuel pushed a cup toward her. I couldn't have... His voice broke. If you hadn't been here, but I was here. Matilda wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Maybe that's what matters. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee while the cabin warmed and the sun tried to break through clouds. Outside, the storm had left the world transformed drifts piled against the barn, icicles hanging from the eaves, everything clean and white and new. The blizzard's over, Samuel said finally. You could leave now. Road to town will be passable by tomorrow. Matilda set down her cup carefully. Is that what you want? He looked at her then. Really looked. Her hair hung loose, brown and simple. Her dress was wrinkled from days of wear. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from lack of sleep. She looked exhausted and beautiful and right. Sitting there at his table with Sarah's quilt around her shoulders and his daughter's fever finally broken. No, he said. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? Samuel. Before he could answer, Emma called from the other room. Papa, Miss Matilda, I'm thirsty. They both stood, but Matilda went first. Samuel followed, watching as she knelt beside Emma's bed and felt her forehead with gentle fingers. The fever's gone, sweetheart. How do you feel? Tired and hungry? Emma's eyes were clear now, focused. Did I dream? Or did you promise not to leave me? You didn't dream. Matilda smoothed Emma's hair. I promised. And do you keep your promises always? Emma smiled, then looked past Matilda to Samuel. Papa, is Miss Matilda going to stay? Please say yes. Samuel's chest tightened. He knelt beside the bed too, taking Emma's small hand. Would you like her to stay? More than anything. She makes us a family again. Those words, so simple, so true. Samuel looked at Matilda across his daughter's bed. She watched him with careful hope, asking nothing but waiting for everything. Emma, he said slowly, what if I asked Miss Matilda to stay forever? What would you think about that? The child's face lit up, brighter than any lamp. You mean like a real mama? Not just pretend? Like a real mama. Oh, Papa. Yes. Emma tried to sit up, but Matilda gently pressed her back down. Easy, sweetheart. You need to rest and get your strength back. But you'll stay. You promise? Matilda's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Samuel. Is that what you're asking me to stay, to be part of this family? He nodded, not trusting his voice. What? The word came out barely above a whisper. I'm nobody special. I'm just a seamstress who got abandoned at a train station. You're the woman who walked into our lives when we needed you most. Samuel's voice was steady now. You're the woman who nursed my daughter through fever when I stood helpless. You're the woman who brought laughter back to this cabin. He paused. You're the woman I want to wake up to every morning for the rest of my life. Matilda covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling over. Samuel, I'm asking you to stay, Matilda. Not as a guest, as my wife, Emma's mother, our family. He swallowed hard. I loved Sarah with everything I had, but she's gone, and you're here. And I think maybe love comes more than once if we're brave enough to accept it. Emma grabbed Matilda's hand. Please say yes. Please, please, please. Matilda looked at the child, then at Samuel. Her tears fell freely now, but she was smiling. I came west looking for a home. I thought it would be with a stranger who promised me one in a letter. But it's here, with you both. It's been here since the moment Emma pulled me through that door. Is that a yes? Emma asked breathlessly. Yes. Matilda laughed through her tears. Yes, it's a yes. Emma tried to jump up, but Matilda caught her. Tomorrow, sweetheart, tomorrow you can celebrate. Today you need to rest and get well, but you'll be here tomorrow. I'll be here every tomorrow. Matilda kissed the child's forehead. That's a promise. Samuel stood and helped Matilda to her feet. In the gray morning light, with his daughter watching from the bed, he took Matilda's hands in his. Welcome home, he said quietly. She smiled. I've been waiting all my life to hear that. That evening, after Emma had eaten broth and slept some more, Samuel asked Matilda to step outside with him. The air was cold and clear. The storm finally passed. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They stood on the cabin's doorstep, the threshold Samuel had swept clean every night for 2 years, keeping the world out. Now it felt different, not a barrier, but a crossing point. I want to do this properly, Samuel said. His breath made clouds in the cold air. Not because we have to, but because I want to. Matilda pulled her shawl tighter. Do what properly. Ask you to marry me, without fever and panic and Emma listening. He turned to face her. I know this isn't how you dreamed it would happen. No courtship. No time to know each other proper. But these past days have taught me more than months might have elsewhere. Matilda's voice was soft but certain. I know you're a good man, Samuel. I know you love your daughter more than anything. I know you keep your promises and work hard and carry more grief than anyone should have to bear. I watched you with Emma during the fever. The words came harder now. Saw you fight for her life like she was your own. Saw devotion that went beyond charity or obligation. He paused, gathering courage. My whole life, I've believed love visits a man once. When Sarah died, I thought that was it. That chapter closed. But, Matilda prompted gently. But Emma's prayer kept echoing in my head. She asked Jesus for a mama for Christmas. And then you knocked on our door. He took her hands. I don't think that was accident. Matilda, I think maybe Sarah sent you. Maybe she knew Emma needed you. Maybe she knew I needed you too. Matilda's eyes shone with tears. I don't want to replace her. You're not. Samuel squeezed her hands. You're something new, something different, something all your own. Emma will always remember Sarah, and I'll always carry her in my heart. But there's room there for you too, if you'll have it. The Montana sky stretched endless overhead, stars beginning to burn in the darkness. Behind them, lamplight spilled from the cabin window. In front of them lay the snow-covered prairie, white and clean and full of possibility. I need you to know something, Samuel continued. This life is hard. Winters are brutal. Money's tight. Some years the crops fail. There's loneliness out here that can break a person. I can promise you hard work and cold mornings and more struggle than comfort. What else can you promise? Matilda asked. Loyalty, partnership, a home that's yours to shape however you want, a daughter who already loves you. He paused. And a man who'll spend every day learning how to be worthy of the gift you're giving us. That's more than I ever hoped for. Matilda's voice trembled. I thought I'd spend my life alone. Samuel. Invisible. Making beautiful things for other people's celebrations while I had none of my own. Then that man rode away from the train station, and I thought it was rejection. But maybe it was redirection. You really believe that? I believe I knocked on the right door. She smiled through her tears. I believe Emma's prayer was heard, and I believe sometimes love does come more than once, not to replace what was lost, but to remind us we're still alive. Samuel released one of her hands and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold band, Sarah's wedding ring, the one he'd kept in a box beside his bed, unable to bury it but unable to wear it either. This was Sarah's, he said quietly. I'd like you to have it, not to be her, but to carry on what she started, building a family, making a home, teaching Emma about love and courage and grace. Matilda stared at the ring. Are you sure this is precious to you? You're precious to me now. He held it out. Sarah would want this. She'd want Emma to have a mother and me to have a partner. She'd want this cabin filled with life again. Matilda let him slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. Matilda Cross, Samuel said formally. Will you marry me? Will you be Emma's mother and my wife? Will you make this cabin your home and this life? Your own, yes, the word came out strong and clear. Yes to all of it. He pulled her close then, holding her against the cold while the stars burned overhead. She fit in his arms like she belonged there, like maybe she always had, and he'd just been too lost to see it. When, she asked against his chest. Soon as the circuit preacher comes through. Week. Maybe 2. He pulled back to look at her. Unless you want something fancier, she laughed. I want what we already have. You, Emma, this cabin, this life, nothing fancy about it, but it's real. It's mine, that's all I need. Behind them. Emma appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket despite being ordered to stay in bed. Did she say yes? Papa. Samuel and Matilda turned together. How long have you been standing there? Samuel asked. Long enough, Emma grinned. So, did she? I said yes, Matilda confirmed. Emma let out a whoop and would have run to them, but Samuel scooped her up first. You're supposed to be resting. I'm too happy to rest. Emma threw her arms around both their necks, making a circle of 3. We're going to be a real family. We already are, Matilda said softly. The rest is just making it official. They stood there on the threshold as darkness fell completely and the stars came out in full. The cold bit at their exposed skin, but none of them wanted to move. This moment, this perfect, unexpected, impossible moment felt too precious to end. Finally. Samuel carried Emma back inside, Matilda following. They settled the child back in bed, both of them tucking her in together. Will you sing to me? Emma asked Matilda. The song Mama Sarah used to sing. Matilda glanced at Samuel. He nodded, throat tight. So she sang. Her voice different from Sarah's, but no less beautiful, and Emma drifted to sleep with a smile on her face. When she was deep in dreams, Samuel and Matilda returned to the main room. They sat by the fire, close but not touching, both understanding that some things needed to be taken slow despite their promises. But the space between them felt different now. Not empty. Just waiting to be filled in time. Thank you, Samuel said into the quiet. For what? For knocking on my door. For staying. For loving Emma. He paused. For reminding me that hearts can heal if we let them. Matilda smiled. Thank you for opening the door. For both of us. Outside. The Montana night stretched cold and clear. Inside, the fire burned warm, and two people sat together planning a future they'd found by accident and chose on purpose. Love had come home. And this time, they both knew enough to hold on tight. The circuit preacher came through the following week. He was a weathered man named Reverend Thomas, who'd been riding the Montana Territory for 20 years, marrying couples and baptizing babies wherever his horse took him. He stood in Samuel's cabin on a clear January morning, his Bible open. While Samuel and Matilda faced each other, Emma stood between them, wearing her best dress and Sarah's locket. Samuel had placed it around her neck that morning, explaining that Mama Sarah would want her to be happy. The ceremony was simple, the words spare but meaningful. Samuel spoke his vows with steady voice, promising loyalty, partnership, and love. Matilda's hands trembled as she repeated her vows, but her voice was clear. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Emma clapped so hard her hands must have stung. "Can I call you Mama now?" she asked Matilda breathlessly. Matilda knelt down. "If that's what you want, sweetheart, but only when you're ready." "I'm ready." Emma threw her arms around Matilda's neck. "I've been ready since you walked through our door." They shared a simple meal afterward: venison roast, winter vegetables, bread Matilda had baked that morning. Reverend Thomas blessed the food and the marriage, wished them well, and rode off toward the next homestead on his circuit. Then they were alone. A family of 3. That evening, Emma presented them with a drawing she'd worked on in secret. 3 figures stood holding hands in front of a cabin: Papa, Mama, and daughter. She'd colored it with precious scraps of pencil, making the sky blue and the prairie gold. "For you," she said shyly. "For our family." Matilda's eyes filled. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." Samuel hung it above the mantel, right in the center where everyone could see. Then he built up the fire, and they sat together, Samuel in his chair, Matilda on the bench, Emma on the floor between them playing with her wooden horse. "Tell me again how you found us," Emma said. It was already becoming her favorite story. Matilda smiled. "Well, I was lost and cold and frightened. And then I saw smoke from your chimney, and I thought maybe someone kind lived there. So I knocked. And I heard your knock," Emma chimed in, "and I knew right away you were supposed to stay." "You did," Samuel agreed. "Pulled her right inside before I could say a word. Because Jesus sent her. For Christmas, just like I asked." Emma looked between them with satisfaction. "And now we're a family forever." "Forever," Matilda confirmed, reaching down to smooth Emma's hair. Later. After Emma had gone to bed with many hugs and several requests for just one more story, Samuel and Matilda stood together at the window. The Montana sky hung huge overhead, stars burning cold and bright. "Scared?" Samuel asked quietly. "Terrified," Matilda admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if Emma needs something I can't give? What if we just take it?" One day at a time, Samuel put his arm around her shoulders. "We'll make mistakes, both of us, but we'll make them together." She leaned into him. "I never imagined this, standing here, in this place, with you, with Emma. I thought I'd always be alone." "Me too." He pulled her closer. "But Emma prayed for a mama for Christmas, and God sent us you. Do you really believe that Sarah would approve?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, thinking, "I think Sarah loved Emma more than anything in this world. And I think she'd be grateful you're here to love her too, to love us both." He paused. "The heart's bigger than we think. There's room for old love and new love both." Matilda turned to face him. "I'll never try to erase her memory. I know. That's one of the reasons I love you." It was the first time he'd said those words. They hung in the air between them, Simple and true. I love you too, Matilda whispered. I think I started falling that first night, watching you with Emma, seeing how gentle you were despite your grief, how you kept trying even when it hurt. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like they had all the time in the world to learn each other. And they did. When they finally pulled apart, they stood wrapped in each other's arms while the stars wheeled overhead. The cabin was warm behind them, Emma sleeping safe in her bed. Tomorrow would bring chores and challenges and all the hard work of building a life together. But tonight, they had this moment, this perfect, impossible, unexpected moment. Samuel looked at the woman in his arms, the stranger who'd knocked on his door on Christmas Eve and changed everything. Welcome home, Matilda Miller. She smiled. I've been waiting all my life to hear that. They went inside together, closing the door against the cold. In the morning, 3 coffee cups would wait on the table, 3 plates would be set for breakfast, 3 voices would fill the cabin with conversation and laughter. The empty chair was empty no more. The lonely cabin had become a home, and a little girl's Christmas prayer had been answered in the best way possible, with love that grew from unexpected places and bloomed despite winter's chill. Emma had been right all along. Sometimes Jesus does listen. Sometimes lost people find exactly where they're supposed to be. And sometimes, love comes knocking on your door wearing a stranger's face, waiting for someone brave enough to let it in. Samuel Miller had opened his door, and Grace had walked through,